Our first storyteller is Stephen again. He is going to pick up my pen. So anyway, let's welcome Stephen Kartstein onto the stage.
Okay. Well, I was excited. I was 7 years old and on my way to sleepover summer camp. For the first time in my life, I was going to be away from my mother and father, out of the house, away from my sister and brother, and on my own. And I was thrilled. I was absolutely thrilled. So as my parents drove me down the freeway towards Camp Yamicus, that feeling of excitement just kind of grew and grew and grew until I just about exploded out of the car when they came into the parking lot of Camp Yamicus. My parents checked me in. We said our goodbyes. They drove away home, and I was there. Now, I didn't think about this till later as to why I was getting the opportunity to go to summer camp, sleepover. I think it was for their benefit as well as mine. I know I was going to have a good time. So, but anyways, Camp Yamicus was all boys. And this was my first kind of experience with a kind of a mass socialization kind of thing. So, and definitely all boys was a little different too. But I grew up in a, fairly casual household, brother, sister, and all that stuff. But anyways, we did everything together at the camp. We slept together in bunk beds. There were 15 or 20 boys, along with a counselor, all age appropriate. I was 7, and there were 7, 8, 9-year-olds in the camp, in the cabin with us. We played volleyball together. I learned archery, and I didn't kill myself or anybody else. I'm proud of that. We went on nature hikes. I crafting, man, I made GIMP bracelets, if any of you know what those are. And I made them for the entire family. No one ever wore them. And I realized that my crafting skills were limited. But I was there. I was having a blast. I was on my own. I was an outdoorsman. So anyways, one day rolled into the next, and all of a sudden it's Thursday. And they told us at breakfast that we were going to be doing something special. Oh, crap, I forgot the bathrooms. Probably the strangest thing and the most impressionable to me was the bathrooms. Now, they were just open spaces, kind of like this room, with just rows of toilets, rows of sinks, urinals, showers were wide open. Nothing was private. So you went in there, there were, 50 or other people doing whatever it is they needed to do, and you did what you needed to do, and you got out. It was very impressive. I mean, you got to understand, the only naked man that I ever seen before was my father. So there was a variety of exposure, let's say. But anyways, So anyways, it's Thursday. We're at breakfast. They're telling us we're going to do something special that night. We're going to go out into the woods, and we're going to sleep under the stars. And I was ecstatic about that opportunity. Here I am, the experienced outdoorsman now, and I couldn't think of anything better than sleeping under the stars. So we did. After dinner, we grabbed our sleeping bags, we marched into the woods. We came upon this kind of cleared area. It was surrounded by the forest, really thick forest where the lake was, and where Camp Yamicus was. And it was, heavy, heavy, heavy forest. And you could see this area had been used before. There were little spots where campfires were lit and things like that. And we kind of settled in, and we were still together in our cabin groups, and we settled in. We rolled out our sleeping bags. We didn't have any weenies or to roast, or we didn't make s'mores, but we had ghost stories. Oh yeah, ghost stories. Now, I had never really been exposed to ghost stories before, so here I am, and I was listening. And I learned about the Yomikas Terror. Ooh, everybody go, ooh. Okay, so the Yomikas Terror was a man who escaped the insane asylum, of course, and lived in the woods in a cabin that he built, and he made his living killing people, dragging them back to his cabin, cutting out their eyes, storing them on the shelves in his cabin, and living a happy life. That was until there was a struggle, and there were with one of his intended victims, and the struggle ignited a fire, and the fire spread and ignited some dynamite that was there, and the dynamite exploded, and the cabin went up smithereens, and all the eyes were scattered all over the forest. Now, the legend has it that no bodies were ever found. Okay, no bodies were ever found. And the legend is that the Yomikas Terror, he is still out there collecting eyes and looking for his missing eyes. I was impressed, to say the least. No doubt about it. And the story ended with a giant screaming, "May the eyes of Yomikas open!" Okay. Well, I have to tell you that every firefly and moth that hit the campfires, bing, for me, were the eyes of Yomikas opening. So my 7-year-old butt, we went to sleep, and everything was fine. Went to sleep, didn't have any problems getting a snooze. When all of a sudden there was this screeching and hollering and yelling and bellowing, and from out of the woods around us poured men, and they were dressed as Indians, and they had feathers and war paint, and they were screeching and yelling and hollering, and they were running through us, and we were screeching and hollering and yelling. And they grabbed some of the older boys and ran back into the woods with them. And that was it for me. I wasn't going back to sleep. So I just kind of laid there in my sleeping bag, looking up at the stars, waiting for that next thing to happen, and nothing happened, but I couldn't sleep. So one of the counselors came by and, noticed that I wasn't asleep and asked me what was wrong. And I said, well, I'm kind of upset. I was scared. So why don't you come over and sleep with us? And, so I rolled up my sleeping bag and walked over to where they were just a few feet away. It wasn't that big a deal. And I unrolled my sleeping bag, hopped in, and relaxed and went to sleep. I woke up because I heard some footsteps. And there were somebody crunching on the leaves and twigs around. And then I heard some breathing. It was getting closer and closer. And then I felt there was a hand that was pushing on the outside of my sleeping bag, as if it was feeling to see if somebody was actually inside the sleeping bag. And I'm lying there on my belly. I'm a belly sleeper, by the way. And my eyes were shut. I was clenched, holding my breath, hoping that this would go away. And it did. But it came back. And this time, when the hand returned to the sleeping bag, it was kind of scratching on the outside of the sleeping bag, as if it was trying to tear a hole in the sleeping bag and reach in and get to me in my safe little cocoon there. And I didn't know what to do. I was just going out of my mind in the bag, and I just kind of laid there like this for I can't remember how long. And then it ended, and it went away. He went away. And I woke up the next morning in my regular spot. I was, with the counselors, just like I was supposed to be. And I got out of my sleeping bag. I looked at my sleeping bag. I mean, there was no marks, there were no scratches, there were no tears in the sleeping bag. I went over to where the boys were that I was sleeping with and or was supposed to be sleeping with, and we were all talking about the raid the night before, but nobody mentioned the visitation from anybody other than, you know, the raid. I didn't say anything about it, and we kind of collected ourselves and walked back to camp. And at breakfast, there were a number of new junior counselors there. They were dressed in Indian garb with feathers and had war paint, and obviously there was an initiation that they had passed. Well, camp was coming to an end. The rest of Friday passed without incident. And Saturday, my parents came, my mom and dad came and picked me up from camp. And of course, they asked me how I liked it. And I kind of lied. I told them about the good stuff. I told them about the, you know, the swimming and the boating and the archery and all that, but I never told them about the night out. I never told them about the ghost stories. I never said anything about the visitation or the raid. And we went home. But Camp Yamicus came home with me. And it came home in a horrible way. The nights were filled with terror for me. The dark held creatures that were out to get me. The closet doors had to be closed. The bed, I had to check under the bed to be sure there was nothing under the bed. To go to sleep, I had to have the covers up almost over my face, like I was in that protective cocoon of the sleeping bag, so that no one could get to me. The creaks of the house and the wind in the trees were him coming back to finish the job that he didn't do in Camp Yamicus. Now, I know I figured out later on that either my mind was playing tricks on me or I was being pranked by one of the counselors. Okay, and I'm going to go with the prank because the other one means that I'm a nutbag. And I realized that, you know, it was one of those things that I couldn't explain, but I did grow out of it. It took time, but I did grow out of it. But there's a couple of things that I still don't do. One, I've never owned a sleeping bag, and I never go camping. Thank you.
So I asked each storyteller the same questions. The first one was, if you could change one thing about the world, what would it be? Stephen said, if I could, I would make education of the population equal across the globe. Who is someone you wish were still around? He said, my dad, my father, to finish rebuilding our relationship. If you could ask God, life, the angels, the powers that be, any question and receive a direct answer, what would that question be? Stephen's was, what makes you worthy? Stephen was the first marketing and program manager ever here at the Elks Performing Arts Center, which opened in 2016. He took the mission very seriously, and the mission was to provide a place for practice and education of the performing arts. And he grew the program from private weddings and events like that to some of the best jazz you'll ever hear in Arizona, to folk sessions, to comedy shows, all kinds of stuff. So we have an incredible asset here because of his work, and Liz has taken over and is doing the same kind of work. He's a good friend, a loyal person. You can absolutely count on him. And although you won't find him camping in the woods or glamping in the woods, you will find him puttering around his garden all summer. Now,